Hello, ladies and gentlemen, college football fans in particular. I'm Tim May. This is the Tim May Podcast. Maybe one of these days I'm going to rename it, call it the But I Digress Podcast. But I digress.
Brought to you by Tim May.
Yeah, brought to you by Tim May. But I digress, as usual. I've got a special guest on here today. You know him, you love him, Austin Ward.
I hope
or as
they
I
do.
call him, Boston Ward, because he tells me what to do now most of the time. But Austin, obviously,
just give
you're not that
suggestions,
special
Tim.
a guest, but you're special in the sense of I want to get into. You once covered the University of Tennessee, for example. You've been around.
Yep.
I've been covering Ohio State football since 1984. I've seen transfer quarterbacks come and go. And of course, we're paying attention around the country right now. This is the hottest topic going is what are these transfer quarterbacks, these transfer fresh from the portal quarterbacks, going to mean to their respective schools? And, of course, there's no better place to start than The Ohio State University has named, Brian Day has named Justin Fields the starting quarterback at Ohio State.
The starting quarterback.
Wow, it took me by surprise. Matter of fact, when he said it today, I went like this.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I had to hold you down.
I know you did.
I mean, that was.
I was about to run to the telephones out in the back. Then I remembered, number one, there aren't telephones out in the back.
Stop the presses.
Yeah. And number two, what a not surprise, as to paraphrase my old friend Hayden Fry.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
That was my worst Tim May as Hayden Fry.
But bottom line is, we've been expecting this since he was
Right.
since
January.
Yeah, since Urban Meyer tried to get him to come on the basketball court at the basketball game when he announced he was transferring. But what do you think finally? What won him the job is the fact that he finally got consistent with the offense. Maybe had a lot fewer turnovers this past week than he did the week before, which moved them to name him the starter. I'm talking about Ryan Day.
Yeah.
We always expected him to be number one on the depth chart no matter what. But I don't know. In your mind, how big of a moment is this for both Ohio State and for Justin Fields?
I think it's significant because it tells you that this is basically when the 2019 football season for Ohio State starts. You can't, if you're a national title contender, you're not going to go in and have a rotation at quarterback. You're not going to use a couple weeks to experiment and find out which guy can actually move the offense better. Because I've said a bunch of times, too, if you're not ready for Cincinnati and their defense in week 2, that's a game where you could get beat if you're Ohio State. So I think that this signifies they're ready to begin game preparation. So it's a matter of timing to me because from what you and I have seen and even the development from March, but just the dual threat ability, he was always going to beat out Matthew Baldwin, even though that could have been a more competitive battle than Gunnar Hoke maybe. But from March to April, you knew what he was going to provide. You knew you could start to see the things that made him the highest rated recruit in school history. Then the leap that we saw just from the small glimpses in August that he was a different guy. So this was always going to be the outcome. But I think that there was that part of it of continuing the competition, Tim, so that he had to keep grinding because he had to get better. It's more like measuring himself against Dwayne Haskins and not Gunnar Hoke or Chris Chuganoff. But when you get to 2 weeks before they're going to play a game in less than 2 weeks, they need to know who their starter was and get behind him.
Yeah, the bottom line is, like you said, it seemed like the sun came up. Justin Fields was named the starting quarterback at Ohio State. Where's the big surprise? But the bottom line is, and I don't, you've been around Justin as much as I have now, and I've talked to guys. We had his high school coach on here a few weeks ago on this podcast, and bottom line is his work ethic has never been in question, really. But it was a question of whether he would progress into the offense like they wanted him to, where they felt secure in, because when you name a starting quarterback, even though the other guys are going to play, it does look like some. And as Ryan Day, when I blurted out who's number 2, he didn't name a number 2, but he mentioned Gunnar Hoke about 5 times in that conversation, and not Chris Chuganoff. But you got to have a pecking order there in case something happens. But the bottom line is you want all of those guys continuing to progress to know that progression in the offense is ultimately what gets you on the field. And I understand that. I don't think they had a question that Justin Fields would work hard, but from a concentration standpoint, et cetera, you got to have confidence he's going to go in there, make pretty much the right reads, and then from there make good throws. And this is all basic quarterback play.
Right.
Before, as I was asking Justin Fields about it, when did you feel comfortable as a high school quarterback as the starter?
Yeah.
And basically, I think he said the first game of his junior year. And by comfortable, I mean now he's not only doing what the coaches want him to do, but then you take it up a notch And when things go bad, things go wrong, you feel comfortable in then playing your game, putting the team on your back and running with it.
And I think,
or throwing.
And you mentioned this right off the top, that you see transfer quarterbacks come and go, and now there seems to be more success stories. But it used to be, when I first started it, and certainly when you've been covering college football, you wanted to transfer in at that position, it almost never worked out because there wasn't going to be. Maybe there was a problem at the previous school. They had issues. They couldn't get the playbook down. Then you were giving them a new playbook, and there was like a reticence to even take these guys as transfers. Now the game has shifted a lot, and part of that is Texas. You've seen Texas high school quarterbacks there that they're way ahead of the curve. You can give these guys a spread playbook in high school, and they know how to do it. Georgia football, the same thing with Justin Fields.
Right.
But there is still a learning curve for those guys, and to expect that they're going to come in right away and be world beaters and game changers is often a lot to ask. Now, for Justin Fields, it is important that, and the only reason I bring this up is because I'm getting to the backup. Justin Fields had the spring to do that, and it's important. He's still, I don't think, going to be a Heisman Justin Fields until he gets 4, 5, 6 games under his belt. I think the potential is there for him to take off. But now, the reason I think we heard Gunnar Hoke's name 5, 6 times today from Ryan Day is because he's having to go through that same difficult process, and he didn't have the spring.
Yeah.
And so now that you know Justin Fields is the starter, you devote a lot more attention, I think, to that backup battle and decide, is Chris Chugginoff really the guy they want, or does Gunnar Hoke have more ability and you need to get him through these next 2 weeks so he can be first off?
And it's ultra important. It's ultra important. And the other thing, and the funny thing was Ryan Day touched on this, that Justin Fields had going for him, and to a little bit extent Gunnar Hoke did. Justin Fields played some last year. I mean, like Ryan Day said, he got home the other night and flipped on the television late, and I'm starting to find out Ryan Day's a lot like me, because if there's even a replay of a 2001
he's a junkie.
Air Force versus Utah game on, I'm going to sit there and watch it.
Yeah.
And he flipped it on, and lo and behold, it was the Georgia Auburn game from last year, and it was that point in the game when Justin Fields was in there, and that's the first thing you hear is Justin Fields at quarterback, and so where that gives you a little bit of a comfort zone, like Ryan Day was talking about, is he has been in action in college football against a Southeastern Conference defense.
And I don't know if that game was in Athens or
I don't
on
remember
the Plains,
either.
but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Because either one is as imposing of situation as you're going to be.
And number two, that's a big-time rivalry.
Yeah.
That's probably second on Auburn's list behind the Auburn-Alabama game. But then number three, the thing is he'd been in there with, I call it the speed of the game. Mm-hmm. And the speed of the game is really, even for the superstars, I don't care if you're coming from California, Texas, Florida, Georgia high school football, the speed of the game when you jump to the next level, when there are maybe 5 defensive backs back there that are pretty good as opposed to 1 or 2 against the teams you played. Mm-hmm. The doors, the windows open and close, the doors open and close so much quicker, and then it's so much quicker from college football to the NFL. That's really the separator. And the point is, Justin Fields had a chance to be on what I call the racetrack. Yep. with the big time race cars, and but now he has a chance to learn and get there. Progress, whatever you want to call it, and that's huge. But it's funny because what I wanted to get to with you is, for example, I started covering Ohio State football in 1984. the real first transfer quarterback I remember coming into Ohio State was Brett Powers, who had been at Arizona State, and things had kind of gone south there, and he came in and he ended up being the backup to Bobby Hoying. Yeah. Bobby Hoying's first year as a starter as a sophomore. What was that, 1992, I think it was. No, 1993. And it ended up being an interesting dynamic because Bobby was really good, and then there were times when he kind of faded a little bit, and they would put Brett Powers in the game, and then Brett Powers kind of became known as that Mr. Cool who came in and sometimes saved a few of those things.
Yeah.
Until finally, against Michigan, 93, it didn't happen.
Didn't work out.
Yeah, so I mean, you can create all kinds of dynamics when a transfer comes in. We'll get into a couple more of those as we go along. But from the leaving standpoint, it was more like guys leaving Ohio State. And I'll never forget. I think it was 1988 or 89. Nick Cochran was a guy. Was one of the guys vying for the starting quarterback job. Greg Fry was around then and stuff. And And Nick Cochran had a really good spring game that year. And I'll never forget after the game, though, he got chastised because he threw a really good big-time over-the-top touchdown pass.
Mm-hmm.
And the quarterback coach then, I think it was Ron Hudson, chastised him because he basically told him in a real game that's not going to be open. And you're kind of going, what? What does that mean? Throw to the open guy, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he ended up transferring to Youngstown State, and I think he was the starting quarterback for one of Jim Tressell's national championship teams there. So it worked out in reverse for him. Of course, then there was no transfer portal.
Yeah.
You left, you sat out a year, and unless you were a graduate, and things like that. But then past that, we'll get on down the line. I'm going to talk about Joe Germain here in a minute, but go ahead.
Well, the portal, it's so fascinating because you talk about one of the reasons I say the transfers rarely worked out is because if you left, you were either going to sit out a year, almost certainly, or you needed to you went to a junior college for a year to play, maybe get better, see what your options were, and that was not usually a way that people actually got better and get another chance.
Yeah.
So those older success stories rarely ever happened. I mean, when I was covering, and people would just get so crazy excited for it, the hype for these junior, he signed with this program, it didn't work, but he went to a JUCO, and now he's ready to go. And this happened not so much when I was covering Tennessee, but before that, Wyoming in these Mountain West schools would always be involved in hoping for a reclamation project, and sometimes it works out. Alex Smith is a very famous example that a former coach here at Ohio State knows, but the guys at Wyoming are getting, this guy signed at a big-time BCS program, went to JUCO. Dax Crum was a name that I'll never forget because he came in, there was all this hype. Oh, boy, he was a 4-star recruit, and, he may have had some grade problems at that previous school and didn't work out, but he's going to be fine here, and he's going to give us that next-level potential for the Cowboys. I mean, I never saw it work at the Mountain West level. I rarely saw it work at the Mountain West level, but now it's completely different because I think the quarterback camps, the Elite 11, the fact that you can go play right away. I mean, I was just trying to think of some examples because
a great example is Joe Germain. Joe Germain went to junior college, Scottsdale. I think it was Scottsdale Community College. But it was out in that area, the greater Phoenix area, where there are about 12 of those. But
Berm's neck of the woods.
Yeah, Bermanology's neck of the woods, and he came in, and you're looking at him kind of like people were looking at C.J. Saunders a few years ago, like, wow, this guy throws a nice ball, but he doesn't. He's kind of little.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't. His dad was a cowboy. And so he had toughness, genetically he inherited toughness. His mom was really smart and stuff. But the bottom line was there rarely has there been a fellow I've seen throw the ball with as much accuracy and touch as Joe Germain did. So as a sophomore, because he only went to junior college for 1 year. As a sophomore, he got into that situation kind of like Brett Powers did several years before that, where he kind of came in as a relief guy to Stan Jackson, but he threw the ball so well, people started clamoring, bring on Joe Germain, bring on Joe Germain. And once again, it blew up on him finally against Michigan because that was the first game he ever started at Ohio State. I remember running the scoop in the paper that morning of the game, and they kicked 3 field goals that game. That was the Ty Streets, Sean Springs slip game. And as I remind people, that only made the score 9-7. Ohio State got beat in that game because they scored no points in the second half. But just when you thought the offense was really going to take off in a game that mattered, it didn't. But it also created, I think, a dynamic in the quarterback room for that season and the next season with Stan Jackson still there. They didn't really – everybody thought they had 2 starting quarterbacks and or who are you going to give the ball to in crunch time, et cetera, because they'd given it to Joe Germain at crunch time in the Rose Bowl at the end of the 96 season, and he led them on that drive for the touchdown. But then he came back and it was still a dance. It wasn't until his senior year when Stan Jackson was gone and you saw Joe Germain – basically become one of the great passing quarterbacks in Ohio State history with David Boston, D. Miller, and all, that whole group. And so you never know. That's the thing. You never know, like you were talking about a while ago, you never know how a transfer quarterback is going to work out one way or the other.
And do you know what's interesting to me about that story that you just told is, and this happens not just at Ohio State but everywhere, how popular the backup quarterback almost always is and the clamoring for it. I mean, that's not going to be the case with Justin Fields and Gunnar Hoke. If Ohio State has to go to the backup, the ceiling goes from true national championship contender, I think, to trying to win the Big Ten. And I don't mean that as an insult to Hoke or Chugunov, but I think the margin between those is significant. But when I look back at the last 7-8 years, just talking about that clamoring, I mean, there were there were people that wanted Kenny Guyton to play instead of Braxton Miller, which was just crazy to me. People turned it on J.T. Barrett at the end of his career. They wanted Dwayne or Joe Burrow, but the year before, they wanted him to replace Cardale, and he did. And it's like, you have to be careful what you wish for in those circumstances. And you make the point there that, hey, maybe it wasn't Jermaine's fault in that game, but it didn't work out, and you got the different guy. You have to be careful.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you never know where that's going to take you. I think it's risky to say never. By the way, and number three, this is an interesting offense because, especially, I think Mike Yurcich is new passing game coordinator, assistant offensive coordinator, whatever you want to call him, the new quarterbacks coach from Oklahoma State. They're going to have even more ways to get guys in space. Mm-hmm. What stood out to me from Ryan Day talking a little bit is he's been impressed with the accuracy, for example, of Gunnar Hoke throwing the ball. I mean, that was where Dwayne Haskins Jr. was able to take it up a notch, I think, offensively last year in the passing game, was being able to hit guys on the run, on the move. JT that was not always his forte. And so we'll see if that carries over from last year to this year of hitting guys on the run, because like I've always told everybody, the reason Florida looked so much faster than Ohio State in 2006 is because Chris Leak was hitting guys on the run, and the Ohio State was dropping off into a soft zone and trying to cover, and you're always going to look faster if you're moving and the other guy is not. But here's the thing. I mean, we look around the country. I mean, I tweeted this the other day. I took the trademark rights on this. Ohio State, you can't get this one. I'm trying to get the trademark on it. Is most valuable transfer portal quarterback with biggest impact by a transfer portal quarterback immediately. Something like that.
In college football history.
Award. Yeah. I'm not going to call it a trophy. I'm going to call it an award because I may just give out a plaque.
Got it.
It may be one of those plaques I make with my burner at home, and chisel. But, I mean, we look around the country right now, man. Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, that could be huge. He took Alabama to the national championship game a couple of years ago. Wasn't his fault they lost it. It was their beloved defense, much like it was their beloved defense last year. Rescued them in the SEC championship game. He's not their guy. Mm-hmm. He moves to Oklahoma. Kelly Bryant goes from Clemson, where he helped them win a huge game last year at Texas A&M. Didn't even get a ring for his troubles because he announced middle of the year he was leaving. Now he's at Missouri, right on down the line. Alex Hornibrook, I'm not even sure how much he's in the play for the starting quarterback job at Florida State.
Wouldn't bode well for Florida State if he was.
Right, but all he did was help Wisconsin get to the Big Ten championship game 2 years ago. Left-hander,
Yeah, Northwestern.
Right.
Missouri, you mentioned that one.
Right.
Those guys aren't exactly in the title race maybe, but Northwestern, that could determine the West.
Yeah. Ole Miss. And then you look down at LSU. LSU's got a guy named Joe Burrow who was probably, if he'd stayed at Ohio State, he might have been the starting quarterback this year. You and I were talking about this because we had plenty of time before Ryan Day came in for his press conference on Monday. And it was really funny, not ha-ha funny, but odd, as in, well, wait a minute. If Joe Burrow had known then what he knows now, would he have stuck around? Probably not, because he got the start last year, just like Dwayne Haskins Jr. did. Mm-hmm. But then if Joe Burrow had stayed, would Justin Fields now be at, like, LSU?
Where would he be? Yep.
It's like that's what's so crazy anymore is you don't need a program. You literally need Twitter to keep up with some of the starting quarterback transfers, et cetera.
And I think where would Justin Fields be if Joe Burrow was Ohio State's quarterback? Would Matthew Baldwin still be in Columbus? Would Tate Martell still be in Columbus? There are so many what-ifs that you can do just with the Ohio State's 2019 quarterback depth chart. Dwayne Haskins could have decided to come stay to win the Heisman and compete for a national championship. Joe Burrow could have just, you remember those old days when the transfer didn't even really exist as a graduate. Stick it down to have his senior year. He could have been a beneficiary there.
Right.
Now that's kind of more wishful thinking for his situation, but Tate Martell, compete in spring instead of bolting at the first chance. You got beat out again at Miami. I think he could have. You'd look at Ohio State's depth completely differently, I think. And I don't believe Tate Martell was a starting caliber quarterback, but you look at that room differently if you have a guy who's going into his third year in the offense. And then if he doesn't do anything, doesn't play, then go as a graduate transfer next year. Seemed like that would have been a better option for him to pursue, but that's not, my decision or place to decide. But it's really wild to just kind of look at it and say, well, what would you take? 1 year of Dwayne Haskins and an inexperienced Justin Fields is probably the best case scenario. Having Joe Burrow for 2 would have been probably tremendous. I think Ohio State easily could have won the Big Ten with him last year and been a contender with him this year. I think a lot of his ability. The only real problem, the way this all played out with the transfer portal that I see, Tim, is that Matthew Baldwin decided to leave. Ohio State never saw it coming.
Right.
It's the whole reason that Gunnar Hoke is now in this conversation for 2019.
Right.
It changes a little bit of what you think when Justin Fields leaves, which I expect now on this growth curve that he's on, that he'll be at Ohio State for 2 years. That's the only way you look at it and say Ohio State didn't see it coming, and that's one that I think they lost out on. Everything else, I feel like they played it about as well as they could have.
Yeah, if there was a theme song for the transfer portal quarterback situation, you know what it would be? It'd be. That's the theme song for 60 Minutes because the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. These guys, they know they get 5 years to play 4. Some of them want to play 3 years and get the heck out.
Right.
The clock is ticking. Quarterback, unlike any other position, I mean, I'm telling people stuff they already know, but it's like they don't throw backup quarterbacks in there just for the fun of it.
Yep.
They rarely, and I just gave you a couple of examples of Ohio State when it backfired playing 2 quarterbacks. By that I mean backfired in the long run. Rarely do you see a team even try to play 2 quarterbacks anymore. You're either the starter or you're not.
Yeah.
It's not like baseball where you can go in and you're going to get quality relief jobs. Dwayne Haskins Jr., correct me if I'm wrong, took every meaningful snap last year, which is the first time.
Well, the ones that he didn't, when they went with that short yardage package for Martell.
Well, yeah.
With the game and the balance, and
yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
but you're exactly right.
I think that
they did try that a little bit, but they didn't really work out for
him.
him.
And I think it was disruptive. Yeah. And I would say, to a certain extent, the same is true in 2015 when they won a game with J.T. Barrett doing that and coming in to finish drives for Cardale. But there's no way that was going to work in the long run. And
right.
It disrupted. And those are 2 great friends, and it still disrupted the chemistry of the offense. Those guys are friends to this day.
Yeah.
I think I'm agreeing with you completely that that's just there's no path forward for me with 2 quarterbacks.
But I don't know how college football continues in this this way.
Free agency way.
Yeah, in this free. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, when you look at Ohio State's quarterback room, comparing it to last year, just at this time, it's just nuts how things have changed. And and on top of that is they've got a new coach, Mike Yurcich. So they're all, except for Chris Chugunov, and he didn't get going till the end of preseason camp last year. But it's just I don't know how it continues. And I mean, like I told you a long time ago, I'll never forget when Alabama signed Joe Namath. I mean, it's really there was no Twitter and everything back then, no internet, but it was big news, man. He was coming from Pennsylvania, and the bottom line is he had to sit out his first year like Rex Kern had to do in 1967. Mm-hmm. But the anticipation was huge that they were going to have this superstar quarterback on the field in '62, and they did, and he was really damn good.
Yeah.
And but the point is, he was going to be there till his senior year. You knew it. It was cool because you not only thought about this year, you thought about the next 2 years with this guy when he matures. Of course, he got suspended by Bear Bryant for staying out too late in Miami Beach.
Hey, you got to let Joe be Joe.
Yeah, exactly. And but the bottom line is you can't do that anymore in college. I mean, even all the other positions are crazy. I mean, the left guard for Ohio State, Jonah Jackson, looks like. He was at Rutgers last year. Just when they got something going on that offensive line at Rutgers, they lose one of their key components. I mean, I'm not sure how this all boils down anymore. I mean, I'm talking about down the road, 5 years from now, what it's going to look like.
Yeah, it changes the game because you're talking about the most important position on the field, to use the cliche. That's it's a cliche because it's true. And part of what makes teams so successful at the NFL level, where there is that true free agency, is that if you don't have a top-tier quarterback, you're probably not going to the playoffs. You're probably not going to make it to the Super Bowl. And now it's changing the way that people, I think, relate to college football, because the thing that you described was those guys picked a place, they stayed there for 4 years. And I don't know that it'll diminish the loyalty that Ohio State alums feel for their school or Ohio State fans feel for it, but the connection is not going to be the same.
Right.
As JT Barrett might be the last one that they ever have.
Right.
That goes through that route.
Right.
And that's hard to really wrap your mind around because, look, when Justin Fields is done, well, even at the Berm can talk about this better than I can maybe with who they're recruiting, but I believe he has said they would think about signing 2 guys in the next class at quarterback. Well, why would you do that if a 5-star, the way that Northwestern just played off with Clemson, is in the portal and he has to sit for a year? Well, that's the one that you're going to be grabbing.
Yeah.
I mean, don't sign another kid coming out of high school. So Ohio State could be active in January in the portal again to try and find Justin Fields' replacement because this time he doesn't have to be eligible right away.
I just thought of this, when they're singing Carmen, Ohio at the end of games, at the end of the season they're singing,
gonna need, like,
and the quarterbacks are going, "How firm thy friendship if I play." You know what I mean?
Well, they're going to need somebody to write down on cue cards the words because it's not their alma mater.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're singing the Georgia fight song, who knows what's going to happen those first few games before he gets entrenched. But, hey, real quick, how about we were both sitting there talking with Chase Young on Monday, one of the 7 captains named, and I just want to throw that in there and pat myself on the back a little bit. Who did he name as the guy that's caught his eye other than on the defensive line, on the defense? A young guy that people don't know about yet.
Oh, gosh. Let me think.
Yeah. It rhymes with doctor. It rhymes with
let's see. Is it that guy from Oklahoma?
Schmochter. It rhymes with Schmochter.
That guy from just outside Tulsa?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Josh Proctor.
Okay.
I'm telling you, man. I mean, it's going to be I'm not the only one seeing it, and the thing is, I haven't even got to watch. But I'm just keeping my ear to the ground.
I mean, I thought I got at a place that I worked before here. I did one of those trips where we went and talked to the recruits. I visited him down there. I wanted to go because I was born in Tulsa. I'd been back in a long time. Go out, meet his family. I was watching him play basketball.
Wait a minute. You were born in Tulsa?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So it was great to be back there.
Home of Shell Oil at one point?
A home of a lot of oil.
Yeah. I know.
For a while, and then boom.
And Oral Roberts University?
That's right. A whole nother story there.
There you go.
Yeah. So I've seen him just the athleticism when he's playing basketball. I was like, holy cow, with this guy.
Yeah.
And, we see that all the time with Ohio State recruits. They're 4- and 5-star guys, but he was as sharp as they come. I saw that he was just bursting with athleticism. I went and talked to his high school coaches and one who, a legendary coach. Josh Proctor led them. They broke up this dynasty. Jinx and Union, if you know Oklahoma high school football, they win it every year. And Josh Proctor breaks it up. He's the game changer. First time in 27 years this school wins the state championship, 6A Oklahoma. He's the reason, and they can do whatever they want with him. He shut down half of the side of the field.
And by the way, what school was that? Owasso?
Yeah, Owasso. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I was already having the brain.
No, because I brought it up to him when I was talking to him in the hall one day. I said Owasso, yeah, but I'm really from Tulsa.
So I'm glad that you jogged my memory because his parents chose that one. They could have sent him to could have sent him to Union. They could have sent him to Jinx. They chose this place, or Booker T. Washington is where his mom went. They're all coming back to me now.
Yeah.
But so this guy, his position coach, went to OU. He played. He was getting the hard push from Bob Stoops and those guys. This is a guy that everywhere in the country wanted, and they pulled him out of Oklahoma. That never happened before. First guy Ohio State ever signs from there. So I'm thinking this whole first year, when Isaiah Pryor is struggling, when Jocelyn Wynn is struggling, well, why not put him on the field? I think he has the same that happened with Von Bell. Once it happened, it happened.
Yeah.
And there was no turning back.
Right.
And that's why I completely agree with you. When he gets on the field, it's over.
Yeah.
He's not coming off.
I'm not saying he's not going to make mistakes, but I'm telling you, this guy just exudes big time. I mean, it just watching him walk.
I'm sorry that was a Tressel story, but
no, that's okay. That was a quasi Tressel Jim Ballman story. But it exudes. I mean, he exudes. Kind of like what we're talking about Justin Fields. There's something different about this guy. I'm not saying he's going to be the next greatest safety of all time, but when a guy like Chase Young has noticed him, that means because like Chase Young said, most of the time I'm going this way. I don't know what's going on behind me. Right. When he notices him and it stands out, I think from what I'm hearing, it could be one of the big breakouts. And who of the captains? CJ obviously, CJ Saunders, great story. I'm gonna write a story about that for our for Lettermen Row down the line here about him and stuff. Is you being my Boston, you gave me that assignment. But
Hey,
the bottom line,
the day that I assign Tim May.
Let me ask you this: don't you think this was a moment? And I'm not saying this guy even pays attention to what anybody talks about, but it's a little bit of a day of redemption for Tough Borland, who everybody, when you're not on the field, people forget you really fast. He wasn't on the field in the spring when we got to watch. He's been named a second straight year. He's been named the captain at Ohio State, middle linebacker. We truly expect him to start. Even though everybody was wanting to give it to Taraja Mitchell, maybe Baron Browning stepping up, coming on big time. But that to me is almost as good a feel-good story for them, for him at least, as anybody.
You talk about a guy who couldn't care less if it's a feel-good story. That's
right.
Borland.
Well, you get that idea,
and that's I think that's part of his charm's not the word, but that's part of his personality and identity, and I think that's why people respect him so much. And the reason I think that Taraja Mitchell was generating hype for very good reason. That guy has the potential to be a star at middle linebacker, but he was getting reps that would have belonged to Tough Borland, and Borland didn't have a chance. He still wasn't quite healthy and able to show. What he did at the end of 2017, I think people have totally forgotten. And I understand that you watch him in 18 and you don't think that
right.
is somebody that should have been on the field. But you also have to remember the limitations there. Should Ohio State have done something to help him, not put him on the field, or maybe put him in a different alignment? Probably they should.
Yeah.
But with Tough Borland, they also see how hard he works. He's never going to say he's in pain, and it's difficult to manage that with a guy like that. It's also what makes you a captain, same way John Simon was with his injuries.
Right.
But at some point you have to say, whoa, or else you're not going to play the Michigan game because you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with John Simon, and maybe Ohio State should have done that with Tough Borland. But if you're talking about personal redemption, vindication, to be a two-time captain, to be in that starting lineup, likely again with a new position coach, a new defensive staff, I think speaks volumes about Tough Borland as a person and as a player. And Greg Madison, when we asked him about the linebackers last Wednesday, I think it was, it was almost like he couldn't believe that anybody would say Tough Borland shouldn't play.
Yeah, or Pete Werner.
Same with Pete Werner.
I mean, Pete Werner was like one of the whipping boys, so to speak, at the end of the year last year. And, of course, when the defensive coaches then were trying to make some changes, they almost took him basically out of the rotation, et cetera. And now he's back. I mean, this is going to be an interesting year because, we're talking about fresh eyes taking a look at the defensive players. Greg Madison almost bends over backwards to talk about what kind of talent is on hand at Ohio State. He does, right?
Yeah, he does.
And he's all but winking compared to where he came from, which, by the way, was University of Michigan. And but don't try to get him to talk about that either. But the bottom line is, but yet those three guys, Malik Harrison, Tough Borland, Pete Werner, could very much be the starting three linebackers if, in fact, that's the package they go with.
That's the key, right?
In the first thing. Hey, one other thing before we go. Who else among the captains did anybody impress you? Obviously, C.J. Saunders, great story.
Yeah.
Walk on, now got his scholarship, and now a captain. But past that, who's impressive to you?
I think this is a great opportunity for J.K. Dobbins because we touched on this when we talked after practice on Monday on Lettermen Live that he called it a terrible year and a failure and all this stuff a year ago.
Yeah.
Most people are going to take 1,000 yards, those touchdowns, a Big Ten championship, and feel really good about it. But he doesn't. And he's always been a little bit soft-spoken publicly and with us, and he still was today. But clearly there's something more, and you've spent a lot of time with him one-on-one too, just talking about Texas and Whataburger and all that stuff. I mean, he's a great personality. You don't always see it in public, so I think there's a couple things there. He's much better, I think, at talking with his peers and good-natured. I've spent some time with the running back room when I was doing Best Fridays in football. He's got the respect of everybody. And I think the fact that he is so hard on himself for what happened a year ago, you're going to see a different player. You're seeing, obviously, an improved leader to get all those votes. And the way he carries himself and what also the fact that you and I talked to him after the Rose Bowl, and he said, it's national championship or bust.
Yeah.
You don't always have guys that are willing to put that on their shoulders. And J.K. Dobbins did that from the second that last season ended till now. And he has no problem with that pressure being put on to be the face of that program. And I give guys credit. If they're going to, when they speak their mind like that and they have with the guarantee, you don't have to guarantee and do the stuff, but guys that are going to be honest and actually say how they feel, I respect the hell out of it.
When you and Bermanology and I we're talking after Monday's announcements and
Yeah.
stuff, I brought up the fact that it really says something about a team and a program when a Chase Young, who, I mean, I've never thought Chase Young was a problem or anything like that, but when he buys the basically considered to be the best player on the defensive side of the ball, one of the great players in the country this year, depending on, no matter where you look, his name comes up.
Yep.
But when he buys into that team stuff, okay, because he doesn't have to.
It's going to be very rich.
When a running back, a J.K. Dobbins tells you he had a 1,004-yard year, 1,000-yard year. If it had been a contract year in the NFL, he'd been sitting pretty. But when he sees you a 1,000-yard year and it's a failure, but for two reasons. Number one, they didn't play for the national championship. And number two, he didn't think he got anywhere close to wringing all the water out of his towel. I mean, nowhere close, because he was trying to hit home runs, etc., instead of being satisfied with hitting a double. Because doubles sometimes turn into home runs when the guy makes an error. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I digress. Bottom line is, when those kind of guys, the so-called stars on your team, have bought in to the team thing, which is why you get elected captain. I mean,
Yeah.
I can name you a bunch of guys in the past that were great players that didn't get elected captain because they weren't perceived as being, that in the, that these guys are working behind the scenes. Tuff Borland is one of the hardest working guys they've ever had. Jordan Fuller's respected by everybody. I guarantee you Jordan Fuller has some really nice conversations with guys behind the scenes. I'm not sure he reveals himself to us very much in conversations, but there he is. He's a two-time captain now. Yep. That's when you can go places as a football team. And we'll see where this goes. This is still an interesting team because it's not super young, but it's inexperienced in a lot of places. In some key spots, where this all goes, leadership is going to take them.
And there's one big one that's left, right? That's the one that you got to wait and see. The quarterback has to be the eighth captain.
Right.
And Dwayne Haskins became that as the season went on last year. That takes time. You have to take control of the huddle, and you talked about just the offense, putting the imprint on. I mean, that's going to happen for him when he's grabbing guys when an adverse situation happens. Whether the quarterback is voted a captain in August or not, he has to become one by the end of the year. And so that's that big one that's hanging out there. Sometimes you retroactively award it. Justin Fields, I think, has
three
to be
things
number
have
8.
to keep happening for a quarterback. Number one, he has to keep progressing, keep learning. Number two, he has to be able to correct a player when he doesn't do what he should have done. And then number three, he has to be able to take criticism when in fact it's justified. And also he has to be able to bear criticism when it isn't justified.
Sure. Yep.
And so we don't know. We think we know about Justin Fields, but we don't know yet until maybe, who knows when. Maybe that game at Nebraska. Maybe that game on Friday night at Northwestern, which is going to be so off kilter for everybody. There's going to come that moment of truth for him in this team when he has to step up and take control one way or the other and take ownership. And that's when this team, I think, will really hit its stride, go over the hump, because they've got the makings for a great running game.
Yep.
They've got the makings for a great passing game if, in fact, he's as good as a lot of people think he could be. Maybe not as good as Dwayne Haskins Jr., but definitely more than good enough.
Absolutely.
So, that's where we stand. And he's a transfer guy from the transfer portal.
Thank God we finally get a game to break it down soon.
Yeah.
I mean, all this talk, we've said millions of words about Justin Fields since January, and none of us have got to see him play a real game for Ohio State. Let's finally have something.
And all Lane Kiffin and Florida Lang wants to do is just come in here and ruin the whole kit and caboodle. Anyway,
I'm going to make a bold prediction and say that they will not.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's another Tim May podcast, soon to maybe be called "But I Digress" podcast. I got to clear that with the with Boston and the rest of the with Glue Man, Spencer Holbrook, etc., and of course Will Crawl, the man of all men. But until next time, this is Tim May. Thanks for joining us.